In 1998, a rather bizarre hunt had begun. A Christchurch newspaper wanted citizens to come forward with more information about what had happened to a headstone back in 1961. Its fate was to be featured in a planned documentary. This headstone had a macabre history, having both intrigued and scared generations of Cantabrians for over 90 years before it was vandalised. A grim memorial to the victim of a heinous murder perpetrated by a man bent on revenge. I am referring to the bloody headstone of Barbadoes Street, a headstone that possessed a mysterious reddened handmark. Let's now travel back to Victorian Christchurch. It was 1871, and one of the largest houses in central Christchurch belonged to one of its most wealthy citizens, William Robinson. His wealth allowed him the luxury of 5 servants. 3 of those were the maids and cooks, Bridget Murray, Catherine Glenn, and Margaret Burke, as well as a manservant the Robinsons had picked up in the Caribbean called Simon Curdino. 2 of those 4 will soon be dead in about 90 seconds, and another all but. The motive for the attack that occurred inside the Robinsons' Parkview mansion on the 9th of January was the alienation and anger boiling inside Curdino. It was one thing for his employer to taunt him, but he was now getting a constant ribbing about his fiancée from his work colleagues, Bridget and Catherine in particular. The other occupants under the Robinsons' roof were totally oblivious to this resentment and anger building inside Curdino. Armed with a knife, the first to be attacked on the morning was Bridget Murray, who was working upstairs. She was stabbed in the neck and chest and collapsed. Thinking she was dead, Curdino went down to locate her partner in crime, Catherine Glenn. Only instead he encountered Margaret Burke, who on seeing Curdino carrying a bloodied knife, hightailed it into the dining room, with Curdino in pursuit yelling, "Do you speak of my girl?" In the room that morning was Mrs. Robinson and a guest, Mr. Patrick Campbell. They witness Curdino attack and kill Margaret by repeatedly stabbing her. Campbell screamed, "You'll kill the girl, you brute," to which a blank face Curdino answered matter-of-factly, "Yes, I killed." You may remember I talked about there being 5 servants. The last one was a groom named Price. He joined the fray and along with Campbell wrestled with Curdino and restrained him, then carted him off, literally, to the central police station. When interviewed, Curdino doubled down on the threats with a defiant claim by the Panamanian that had Mr. Robinson been inside the house, he would have started on him first. He was now showing strong signs he was suffering some sort of psychological breakdown, talking to non-existent people and mumbling in his native language, Spanish. A trial was held and Curdino was found sane at the time and sentenced to hang. The quivering testimony of a now recovering and traumatised Bridget Murray sealed his fate. Less than 3 months after the murder, Simon Curdino was hung in the Lyttelton Gaol. Not before he had attempted suicide in the days leading up to his execution. In those days they didn't muck about. Justice was swift. And similarly swift was the funeral of Margaret Burke. Just 2 days after she was murdered, she was buried in the Barbadoes Street Cemetery. With no relatives in New Zealand and next to no savings to her name, her grave was originally unmarked. Feeling some responsibility, they had been the ones who had brought all the participants together, been the catalyst for the tragedy. The Robinsons funded a headstone, which was erected in September of 1871. It read, By October, a month later, people began noticing a peculiar reddish-brown mark on the headstone. A spot, when raining in particular, resembled darkened blood. A mark that had the shape of a hand. And to add to the intrigue, some days it was visible, other days not. Rapidly it became a ghoulish tourist spot, night more so, when generation after generation of teens challenged each other to enter the graveyard at night and touch the reddened hand, if you dared. Others took the view it was a sign of a miracle, and religious pilgrims were also known to visit the graveside to pray. Then there were those who just said it was the Robinsons going on the cheap. The monument was a second, and it had a flaw. A flaw that, despite hundreds if not thousands trying, could not be simply rubbed or scraped away. There the bleeding gravestone stood in the Barbadoes Cemetery for 90 years, till vandals smashed it to pieces one night in 1961. Are then said to have either stolen the very section with the blood marked on it and left the rest, or, another theory says, the entire gravestone was taken away in pieces by the Parks Department, could now be located along with the hundreds of other gravestones that succumbed to both time and the recent earthquakes, could well be gathering dust in a council warehouse. Those were two of the theories put forward in 1998 in an attempt to solve a 60-year-old mystery. Where is the bleeding headstone? Lastly, with so much notorious and salacious history to be found in one location, Richard Greenway runs tours in the Barbadoes Cemetery. I hope you enjoyed this one. It's not the first and only legend to be born from a Christchurch cemetery. There's the one about the Goatman of Lyttelton. The link for that's below. Thanks for your time today, and I'll spot you next time. Bye for now.